Hey, everybody, welcome back to Lead Full Circle. My name is Graham Adderholt, and we again have a special guest that I'm excited to talk to today. So many leadership points and takeaways that we'll gain from our special guest. So today it is an honor to have a conversation with Lauren Sisler. Lauren Sisler is a national award-winning sports broadcaster who has been captivating audiences with her insightful coverage on ESPN since 2016. Not only is she a powerhouse in the broadcasting world, but she's also the author of the compelling new book, Shatterproof. Lauren is passionate about sports, but even more passionate about telling the stories of the coaches, athletes, and fans who make it more than a game. Lauren's path to success hasn't been a simple march to victory. In 2003, during her freshman year at Rutgers University, Lauren faced a profound tragedy that could have halted her dreams. Amidst her grief and despair, Lauren discovered an incredible courage that propelled her forward, turning pain and shame into a pathway for success. Now she shares her journey with audiences nationwide, aiming to shed light on crucial issues and dismantle the obstacles that prevent us from embracing our fullest potential. So let's welcome Lauren Sisler to the stage here at Lead Full Circle. Lauren, thank you so much for taking time today to join us here at Lead Full Circle.
Thank you, Graham. I appreciate it. Just really appreciate the work that you're doing, and obviously the leadership, knowledge, and expertise that you've garnered in your long tenure of all the different things that you've done throughout your career. It's cool to kind of be on this stage and be able to kind of give some words of encouragement and wisdom, to hopefully those listening today.
Perfect. So that's right where I want to start is. Really, your new book, Shatterproof, is out. And if you don't mind, for those that are listening, just talk a little bit about Shatterproof and the reason you wrote the book and just a little bit of your story, because I think that's so meaningful and will really set us up as we go through some conversations. We talk about leadership and your journey through life.
Yeah. So, I was given this opportunity to write a book, and it really took me a very long time to have the courage to actually put pen to paper and tell my story. Shatterproof is a memoir, and it really kind of leans into my personal story of losing both of my parents to opioid addiction when I was a freshman at Rutgers. I was on the gymnastics team there. So I grew up as an athlete. My brother was also an athlete, and we grew up in a very tight, close-knit family. It was me, my mom, my dad, and my brother. And, the story, just really talks about, just the shame that I carried for many years because of how my parents died. It happened unexpectedly, such a tragedy. I got a call from my dad when I was a freshman at Rutgers, as I mentioned, to let me know that my mom had died, to get on the next plane I could, and he would be at the airport to pick me up. And unfortunately, he didn't show up that day, and he too passed away, both of them dying within hours of each other from fentanyl overdoses. Both of them had gone to a pain management doctor. Both of them were dealing with chronic pain and ultimately became addicted to their medication, and weren't able to get the help that they needed to kind of overcome that addiction. And so it ultimately took their lives. And so really, the Shatterproof kind of talks about this idea of how, people walk through adversity. Someone or something can seemingly take a baseball bat to your life and shatter it into a million pieces. But through the human spirit and through resilience, we all have the ability to pick up those pieces and create a life of purpose and of joy. But it starts with taking the first step, and it really starts with a choice. How are you going to respond to adversity? And so really the memoir kind of dives into that, sharing that piece of the story, how I overcame that shame, and really just, found my success, my pathway to this sports broadcasting career. But more than that, just to be able to help other people who are walking through adversity and ultimately help people fall in love with their stories. And that really is the ultimate goal, and what I hope that people will take from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to kind of elaborate a little bit on that part of it. How did your experience with just your perseverance through those tough times and just you growing as an individual shape the way you think about leadership today?
Yeah, it's interesting because growing up, I obviously had opportunities to be a leader in the gym, because I was, one of the top level gymnasts for a long time, although I was still young and naive and obviously, didn't even know one thing about leadership. But little did I know that I was leading people, guiding people. People were looking up to me. I was a role model for them. And so that leadership did start early. But then I started taking on that leadership role, especially so I get to college. I was voted team captain. And that also took on another role in and of itself of kind of that leadership. But what I learned in this process is like, leadership isn't necessarily about having all the answers, because I think that that's one thing that we always want to know the why. And especially after the tragedy that happened with my parents, it was like, well, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to my family? I want the answers. Well, truth be told, it took me 19 years to even like start really digging in and exploring more of the questions that I had and finding those answers and writing this book. But then even still, I have so many questions. So it's not always necessarily about having all the answers. It's really about just being present in the hard moments, right? And then I think another piece of leadership that I think is so important, Graham, is empathy. Being able to lead with empathy. So when I think about this experience, how it shaped the way I lead, a lot of how I lead is not textbook, right? It doesn't come from a textbook. It comes from lived experience, what I've walked through, the biggest lessons I've walked through grief, and still being able to grow and really guiding other people along the way to do the same. Because I think when we can stand up and show people our courage to keep fighting, to keep showing up, to keep moving forward, even in the face of adversity and tragedy, that's a courageous move. And I think it gives other people permission to do the same. And to me, that is what real leadership is all about.
Yeah. So you mentioned empathy. I want to ask you, your leadership today, whether it's the broadcasting world, you travel around, you're a motivational speaker. Are there any other principles, values? I know you just mentioned empathy, but anything else come to your mind that really guides your leadership and just kind of who you are each day?
Yeah. I mean, I think I have, as a sports reporter, been on a lot of sidelines, been in a lot of locker rooms, as a coach, some of those locker room speeches, the things that I hear, sometimes I'll latch onto them and I'll be like, wow, like this applies to my life. Like, this is not just for the game. This is not just for the win, right? This is real life here. And so a lot of those principles that I pulled from different coaches, from different athletes, I have like a kind of a rolling notepad, digital notepad on my phone that when things pop up, I'm like, ooh, I got to write that down, because I will tell you, there's so many great leaders out there, especially on the field of play, so many great leaders in the coaching sphere. And so it's really cool to kind of just lean into that. And of course, I think one of the principles that has been guiding for me that really kind of goes back to Nick Saban. So of course the Alabama fans out here will appreciate this, but this idea of be where your feet are. And Graham, I'm sure you probably have, whether you've heard be where your feet are, or it's something you've preached yourself as a coach. I heard it from Nick Saban first, but then I every locker room I've been in, like, it shows up somewhere. And this idea of being where your feet are. And it's not about perfection. It's about presence. And I think that is where we have to learn to be more present, because when we are in that leadership role, a lot of times we think we've got to be perfect and we've got to be up here, right? Because we're leading everybody. So we've got to be on our A game. We've got to be perfect, and we can't show any cracks, no flaws, right? But at the end of the day, it's about presence, because when we can be present, we can lean in and listen to those around us and be better leaders, because we have the ability to listen. So I think that's important. And then it's leading with your story, not your title. I think that's another piece of this that is so critical, because I think in so many ways, we all have a title next to our name, right? Some of us have flashy titles or have the letters behind our name, whether it's with a doctorate or, whatever degree it is. But even as coaches, right? Having that title of coach, sometimes you think, okay, I've got to lead with my title, but really it comes down to credibility and authenticity coming from your story. And that is ultimately being vulnerable, being honest, and showing people that, hey, I'm just as human as you are. I don't have all the answers here, but I'm going to help walk you through this because I've walked through it too.
Yeah. I want to go back to the being present, be where your feet are. I agree with you 100%. That's so important to not be pulled in 100 million different directions. Be present in the moment. Don't look too far ahead of what you're trying to get to, or don't let the past dictate who you are either in the moment. So I honestly want to transition to home and family, because I feel like a lot of times, just with me as a husband, as a dad, and with work and all that goes with that, we can be pulled in a lot of different directions, and we're not as present at home as we should be all the time. When we get home, we're checking our phone, checking our emails still, taking calls. So do you have anything in place? What helps you at home be present at home, and just when you're home, really be there for your family?
Oh, that's such a great question, man. And I wish I could say that I was good at it because, especially as I literally share be where your feet are in a lot of my messages. And, sometimes to a fault, it's been interesting having a 2.5-year-old at home, like really leaning into this be where your feet are, because sometimes it's almost like I try to immerse myself so much in the moment that I'm so afraid the moment's going to escape. And then right. You blink and my son's running around now and he's got a million words, and it seemed like yesterday he was barely walking,
Mm-hmm.
And so, this idea of being present though, is so important, because I think in life, I kind of use this idea, this analogy, like we're always running. Okay. And I feel like in so many ways, we're always running away from the things that scare us, but then we're always running to the next thing, right? We're running to that next promotion, that next job title, right? That next opportunity. And so this idea of being where your feet are is like slowing down. And as you said, Graham, it's when you're in the quiet moments, when you're at home, even in the chaos of what's happening at your house, finding sacred moments in that, right? When everybody's running around and, the dishes are piled up in the sink and life is just chaotic. Like that's also proof of life, right? That's proof that we're living. That's proof that we're surviving over here. And it's just finding those little moments. And so what I've learned, and even just, these are just like a little tactical takeaways, is like, it's so easy for us to like have our phones like sitting next to us at all times, right? It's crazy. Like, and I try to get to where, I'll put my phone on do not disturb, in those hours that I'm spending with my son, and my husband. So that means like, when we sit down to dinner, like put it on do not disturb, because in that way I'm not tempted to check the phone or, look at my phone, or, oh, it just buzzed and it gave me a notification that somebody's reaching out to me. Right. And so it's being intentional with that time and saying, okay, from 6 to 8 p.m., phone's going away. It's going in the other room, or it's going on moon mode, do not disturb. And even after my son goes to bed, and, my husband and I will talk about this sometimes, but sometimes we have to like reset ourselves. And it's like, okay, we're about to turn in for the night. And instead of being on our phones, let's have intentional time where we sit and we talk and we spend time with one another. And, maybe that's, just sharing what happened with the day. Maybe that's getting into the word, kind of, leaning into our spiritual faith, or just being present, right? Just resting, relaxing, not having 1,000 things. Because let me ask you, Graham, are you one of those that literally will watch a show on TV and then have your phone and you're doing 1,000 things on your phone while also watching a show?
Unfortunately, at times I am. Yeah.
Isn't that terrible? Like I'm thinking, like I sometimes have to tell myself, like, no, like you're watching the show. Pay attention to the show. Like you don't need to also be scrolling on social media and like doing all these other things. Right. So it's really just being intentional with those things and kind of being immersed in it. And I even sometimes going into big milestone moments, I will tell you like, okay, so let's just say, it's a birthday. Well, there's going to be all the chaos of the day, making sure everything's planned, everything's put together, everything's perfect, right? But I will go into the day and kind of lean into prayer. And of course, my faith is my faith as a Christian, but really just say, hey, let me be where my feet are today. Like, let me lean into this. Let me focus on this moment. Even when things get crazy and I feel like it's not perfect, let's just be in it. Right.
Mhm.
And that kind of helps ground me in the moment and say, hey, like, I'm here, like we're in it, and let's give it all we've got.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. Put your phone on do not disturb when
Yes.
you're home with
I
your
call it
family.
moon mode. Put it
Yeah.
on moon mode.
Yeah.
Nothing's that important. And I think it's become, I will say this, and maybe you agree or disagree, but I do think it's becoming more acceptable. I have noticed, and maybe this is like, I've been wanting Apple to have the unread, how you can now
Mhm.
swipe it and make it
Yeah.
unread. Like I've been wanting them to do that for years, just like email, because it's like you see something, but like you don't have time to respond to it in that moment.
Right.
I love that feature because what it does is it allows me to come back to it. And I think in a lot of ways, people are starting to become more accepting of the
Mhm.
fact that I'm not going to answer you right away. And if I don't, I'm not going to apologize for it. So if
Right.
it's a day that goes by before I respond back to you, I sure know when people respond back to me a day or two later and they apologize, I say, no apologies here. Like,
Mhm.
we have this expectation that it's a text message. You got to get right back to me, just like
Right.
email and everything else. And it's like, no, like you don't. And so I think those are the things to kind of recognize. And I think that maybe in some ways society is starting to allow ourselves a little bit of grace to say,
Mhm.
okay, like,
Yeah.
you can have some grace in this timeline of when you need to respond to people.
That's good stuff. So, transitioning back to your career with your time as a gymnast, broadcaster, speaker, you travel around. So, where I'm going with this is that's a lot of transition from one thing to another, a lot of change. So, when you think about change in your career, has there been any leadership advice you could give us as far as how do you how do you deal with change? How do you deal with transition as a leader to continue to move forward and make progress in your life?
Man, change. Um, I have a love-hate relationship with change, and we probably all do, right? Because I will say, I've become a creature of habit. I do love to explore. I love to see new things. But then also too, it's like I get in my routine. And so I will say, I think that navigating change, uh, you know, can be challenging, but I do feel like in a lot of ways that I have been almost in some ways conditioned and built for change and built for chaos. Because my therapist and I talk about this. It's so funny because we laugh about it, but there's a lot of truth in it. I tend to thrive in those chaotic moments, right? Like the mundane, like, oh, I'll get to it, right? But then when I know I've got, like, I'm on the clock and it's like, you got to get it done and you got to do it well, it's like, boom, I'm going. And I think a lot of that comes, number one, from like my gymnastics career, just kind of how I was really, good at kind of boxing things up, compartmentalizing, moving on. You fall down, you get back up, you do the next routine, next man up kind of mentality, right? But then in the broadcasting world, it really is like you got someone in your ear. They're counting you down, ready or not, 5, 4, 3, 2, go. And so I feel like I have, maybe in a lot of ways, been conditioned to thrive in those chaotic moments and those moments of change when you can't predict everything. But I think that's where I've really had to learn, you know, when I think about navigating change, where can I be also grounded in those moments? And I think gymnastics certainly taught me discipline, right? It taught me discipline, and it really taught me how to fail publicly, and recover quickly. Just because you fall down, you get back up, you keep going, right? You compartmentalize it, put on a shelf, move on. And then I think that broadcasting really, has taught me, I guess, to find my voice in a lot of ways. And I think in a lot of ways, broadcasting has given me confidence to lead with my voice, to trust my voice, to know that my voice matters, that it has a place in this world, right? And that's something I hope to teach everybody else. But I think the one thing too, when we think about change, and this is something I also share, and maybe a principle that can be applied, this
Mhm.
idea of jumping scared, it's been big for me, because I think that we oftentimes try to wait till we're 100% confident in where we're going,
Mhm.
100% confident. I'm 100% ready. And then I'll take the leap. I'll take the jump. But rarely are we ever 100% ready. rarely are we ever going to remove every bit of doubt and fear in our minds. So you have to learn to jump scared, right? You just do it anyways. And I think that is really, truly what shows up in a great leader, is a leader not having all the answers, not knowing exactly where they're going, but jumping anyways, and having the grace to show people that courage when they do, even when fear and lack of confidence is staring them in the face.
I thought about this question that I want to ask you now that just kind of came to my mind when you talk about taking a leap of faith, having courage. You mentioned your gymnastics days. I want to talk about youth sports and just seeing, I feel like the past few years and where we are today, as me as a high school principal, more and more kids are choosing not to be involved in sports. What is, and this is not even really a leadership question, but I think if you're on a team, you have the opportunity to learn how to be a leader. So how important is it, you think, for kids to be involved in not even just athletics, but the band or art, just to be involved in something as they're coming up through middle school, high school, as they get ready to maybe go to college or even just straight to the workforce? Do you think being involved in something like an athletic team or a fine arts program is important for kids at a young age?
Oh, I think it's so important, because I think that team teaches us so many things. And I will say this, even as a gymnast, right? Think about this. My career growing up really was, gymnastics is a very individual sport,
Right.
but I was still part of a team, part of a program, and part of a support system. And I think if nothing else, when you put yourself on a team, you enter into a different realm of, having a support system, having people that are with you, that understand you, and that also can help pick you up when obviously things, become challenging. I think that being part of a team, though, is such a connector, right? Because I think that when we're not meant to live this life alone. We're not meant to do life by ourselves. And I think that, getting involved in different extracurricular activities, whether that is athletics, which I think obviously teaches so many disciplines and so many things that you can carry with you through life. I tell this to people. I say, go be an athlete and, put that on your resume.
That's right.
And it will speak volumes. And it's not the stats. It's not the stat line that's gonna, make somebody want to hire you. It's not going to be, how many points you scored or how many assists you had. It's going to be the idea that you have dedicated yourself to a sport, to a team, and how do you operate within that team. And any company would look at that and be like, well, come work and be part of my team, right? Because you already have that skill set. But I think it's so important. And then I just think, again, I go back to the support system. If I did not have my support system, the foundation of what I had when I went back to Rutgers, I was back on a plane 10 days after both my parents passed away. 10 days back on a plane back to Rutgers. Let me tell you, it was a roller coaster ride. I was failing out of school. My grades were struggling. I was always an AB honor roll student. Everything was falling apart. But the thing is, my team wasn't going to settle and just let it happen. And I think that was a big piece for me, is that they stood in the gap and made sure, hey, Lauren, we're not going to let you fall. We're not going to let you fail. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so they really helped put the pieces in place to give me the strength and courage to keep going. And I think that when you have that community of people, whatever extracurricular activity that is, like they've got your back. And I think that is so important, to be part of those communities and to really find your passions through those things can be so pivotal in people's lives. Yeah,
absolutely. So I want to go back to a few minutes ago. You spoke about your faith and being a Christian. And for me as well, I'm a Christian. So that drives me as far as who I am each day as a leader in the role that God placed me in. So I just want to touch on that with you. Is how does your faith drive you and how you lead people each day?
Man, my faith is such a big part of who I am. And it always has been. I grew up in a family, where faith was at the center of it all. And, my walk with God hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been easy. And, I'll be honest with you, when my parents died, there was some level of anger. I was angry, angry at my parents. Like, why did this happen? Why did you not speak up? Why did you not share what was going on? Why did you not clue us into like the struggles that you were having so maybe we could get you help? But also there was some discussions with God too that was like, God, like, why? In my mind, we went to church, like we said our prayers, like we were a God-fearing family, as a unit. And yet this happens to my parents. Like, why? And I think that in a lot of ways, I had to lean into that and find my faith again. And so, I felt like when I went to Rutgers, it was kind of finding my way. And then after my parents passed away, it was a little bit of like, I didn't quit believing in God. I just kind of leaned out a little, right? It's like, oh, Footprints in the Sand. It was then that I Carried You was always like my number one favorite poem. I read it often with my parents even. And when I would have, setbacks, especially in gymnastics and different challenges in life, that was always like my foundation. It was then that I Carried You. And I would always lean into that Footprints in the Sand poem and that saying. And yet when I met my greatest challenges and my darkest days, I was kind of like, I'm going to do this on my own. Right. It's almost like I didn't quite trust God, yet he was carrying me the whole time. And so it was finding my way back to that. And I think that's the beauty in our relationship with God, is that like he's with us through thick and thin. And even if we kind of put him in the back seat, he's like, all right, I'm here. I am here for you. Whenever you're ready to come back, I am here, arms wide open. And I think that is, where I really found myself again. I got reconnected with Athletes in Action at Rutgers, which is basically like FCA,
right? Fellowship
of Christian Athletes. So that Athletes in Action is something I got really plugged into and started spending a lot more time in the Word and, in devotion with different student athletes. And that was big for me. And I think that was my next big step. And then I will just say, Graham, in my marriage, finding that person that will walk and grow your faith journey with you is so important. And my husband, John, has been every bit of that and has really led the way. And our faith has grown together. And so it's been just important for me. And I know I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have my Lord and Savior, if I didn't have God, guiding the path. And I truly believe that he directs our purpose. We just have to open our eyes to it. And as much as there's a million things that I could have gone and done with my life. And, I told you, I keep chasing this, like, what's next at ESPN? What's next? But I truly believe God's got me where he wants me. And maybe it's not, being front and center at ESPN or, on whatever talk show or this or that. It truly is doing what I'm doing now. And I have to recognize that and say, okay, I'm going to honor this. And I'm going to be where my feet are and do the best job that I can.
That's right. So this is why I love talking to different guests, because we all have different life stories. So this question is directly personal just for you. And I just really think it's important for those to hear it. So you've become a voice for families affected by different tragedies, addiction, mental wellness. So what role do you think your leadership style, your leadership plays in just breaking the stigmas and just the importance of creating safe places to have conversations about those struggles?
I think it goes back to this idea of vulnerability. And I will say this, for many years, I could not confront the truth. I could not confront what happened to my parents because society told me what addiction was. And I felt like my parents can't be addicts. Like no, right? Society tells us that belongs to certain people and it's a character flaw and And so when I finally came back around to that after years and years and years of running away from the truth, my auntie Linda, my mom's sister, really helped me to understand that my parents aren't defined by how they died, but by how they live their lives. that was life-changing for me, because it's like those shackles of shame just started to break. And I have found such a profound freedom in just honoring the truth and stepping into the truth. But it takes courage, to be so vulnerable, to be so open, because we love to hide the hard things, right? Shame tells us to go sit in the corner. Don't talk about it, right? And for me, it really has been, let's address this thing head on. Let's talk about it and find that freedom, and that doesn't necessarily mean you got to get on a stage in front of 1,000 people and share your story in your most vulnerable moments. But maybe that's in a small room, a small office setting with your team, with one person. When you can name the thing that might be the most shameful thing, all of a sudden you just start to see like, wow, like I did it. And oh, by the way, the person on the other side receiving it is also walking through something. Mm-hmm. And we all have that, connection in some way, shape, or form. And I think that is so important when it comes back to what you're asking with conversations, having those important conversations. Because I'll tell you this, I don't want to call it regret, because I don't necessarily feel that what happened to my parents is something that, of course there's always what ifs. I do wish that maybe I would have leaned in and asked more questions at the time. Why didn't I ask more questions? That's what I do for a living. Like, I literally ask questions for a living. And I felt like a lot of times I was living in my own world, oblivious. And of course, my parents did a good job of hiding what they were walking through with their addictions. But I wish I would have maybe leaned in more and asked more questions and had those conversations. And so that is really my encouragement for other families is, to be honest, to be open, to be vulnerable, to explore the things that you may not want the answers to. Because at the end of the day, we are all human. And I think that we have to have those important conversations to break down those barriers, to break down those walls, and ultimately find hope and healing in the tragedies and the adversity that we are all going to face in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And so that really is just, to me, the foundation of it all. And so I just encourage families, I thought I was close with my parents. We absolutely were close. But they were harboring a very deep secret that we as a family didn't know and understand. And I don't know if those questions, those answers, I don't know if those conversations would have changed the outcome of what happened to my parents. Mm-hmm. But what I do know is that those conversations are so critical and so important. And those are conversations that I want to have with my son as he gets older, to build that trust and build that connection and say, hey, son, you can come to me no matter what.
Yep. That's right. So you've built a very successful career in sports media, a space that you can speak to this more, but is probably underrepresented for women when it comes to this career path. So what kind of leadership example do you hope to set for young women as they explore any career option, but just to give them, just to look at your life? What leadership example do you hope to give to those young women?
Yeah, it's awesome. I love being in this role. I think that women in sports is a lot more widely accepted now. Right. And, I will say there's still moments, let me tell you, Graham, you probably know this as a coach too, and as someone that's been behind it, I'm sure as a principal of a school now, like, look, you get feedback whether you want it or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you got the keyboard heroes back there that hide behind the computer screen, right? Ooh, they got the happy fingers. They're willing to say anything and everything because they're behind that computer. Woo, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So I've seen it. I've heard it. I've had a lot of people comment on it. But I will say, one thing that I pride myself in is the fact that I've earned my role. I've worked hard. Yes, imposter syndrome sets in, and sometimes I'm like, how did I get here? Like, why me? Right? But then I have to remind myself, why not me? Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important, and especially when we're cast into roles once again that we feel like we maybe don't belong or we're not equipped for. it's taking a step back and saying, why not me? And I'm going to own this moment. I'm going to own this opportunity. And yes, I will slip up. Yes, I will fall, but falling is not failing unless you refuse to get back up and keep going. Right. And so, I am grateful for this opportunity to be a female, to be out there. And of course, I'll address this because, it gets asked of me a lot. But the subtitle of my book is Shatterproof. And then the subtitle is How I Overcame the Shame of Losing My Parents to Opioid Addiction and Found My Sideline Shimmy. And so people always ask about the sideline shimmy. And it's funny. I was just downtown doing a speaking event at Brasfield and Gorey, and the security officer, came and tapped on my window. He says, "Hey, you're a sports reporter. You're the one that dances on the sidelines, right?" And it just made me laugh because, it's great sometimes to be known for something that maybe brings joy. Like he's like, I just love that so much. And I saw him light up and the smile on his face. Look, I don't claim to be a good dancer, y'all. And I'll tell you, the keyboard heroes will let you know behind that keyboard. The comments fly.
Yeah.
Quit trying to show off, quit trying to do this. You're an old washed up mom. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, so what? Like, I'm going to own this. I'm a former DJ. I love music. I love dancing. But really, ultimately, to me, it's finding the joy in that. And so I think that, it's finding your own, your personality within what you do, right? And not always comparing yourself. And I think, I'll say this, Graham, I know that you obviously, as a male, sometimes there is the comparison game, the expectations, kind of falls on like, well, I have to be the leader of the household and I have to be you have your own list of things that are kind of built into the, this is what I have to stand for. And this is what I have to accomplish as the man in my household. Mm-hmm. Well, us as women also have, a set of things that we, society thinks we have to adhere to. Right. But I share all that because I think that in so many ways, comparison really sets in for all of us, and we all compare ourselves. And it's this idea, and especially as a woman, like I've got this timeline. If I don't get married by this time and I don't get, I don't have kids by this time, my biological clock is ticking. What am I going to do? Like it's all these things in all society, and then social media telling us, right. We got to do it by this time. That can be challenging. And so I would just encourage anyone listening to this, male or female, but especially the females out there that don't allow that comparison and what everybody else is doing dictate your timeline, because your timeline is your timeline. And in time, your God-given purpose will blossom. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it requires a lot of patience, mm-hmm. and it requires a lot of doors slamming in your face and a lot of rejection. But on the other side of that is, the strength and the beauty and the purpose. And so I think that, sometimes you just have to be patient and wait for those things. And gosh, sometimes it's hard, it's really hard. And I have to admit, we're women, we're emotional beings. And sometimes we lead with emotion instead of up here. Right. So, it can be challenging, but I am grateful to be in this place where I can, hopefully encourage other women to kind of go after their dreams and chase the things that some people would say is not possible.
Right. Absolutely. So last question, I think this ties directly into what you just said there. Looking ahead, what impact do you hope your story, your example sets for those as time goes forward? Maybe, what example do you hope leaves for your son?
I actually share this a good bit when I, do some speaking events and whatnot. But, this whole idea of honoring our lives, honoring legacy, right? And so for so many years with my parents, it was this idea of preserving their legacy, right? So that was, don't talk about it. Don't bring the addiction to the forefront. Don't acknowledge it, right? I spent years running from that. And really, quite frankly, it became exhausting. And as I've come full circle in these moments of reflection and kind of understanding, like, I know my son is going to ask questions one day. He's going to see pictures of my parents. I'm going to talk about my parents with my son. And I look forward to that day that he can understand and comprehend, that he had a set of grandparents that were amazing human beings, that were filled with love and joy and compassion, but also struggled. And I think it's so important for him to understand that, because we are so quick to cue up the highlight reel for everybody to see. But it's not always about the highlights. We've got to honor the struggle too, because that truly is what legacy is all about.
Mm.
And that's what I hope that I can share with him, is like, life's not going to be easy. Life's not going to be perfect. You are going to get knocked down. And if we keep putting the mask on, this mask of concealing the hard stuff, and only give people the good in life, then we almost, in a lot of ways, set up people for false expectations, right? And so I think that that's what I hope that I can teach Mason along the way, is that life is going to get hard. Life will be challenging. We have to honor every part of our legacy, not just the highlight reel, and ultimately help him to fall in love with his story, even the tough, most challenging chapters that he will surely face.
Yeah. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for taking time today to talk to us. Just your story, your example has made an impact on so many people, and it will continue to make an impact. So just thank you for sharing some of that with us today. There's so many practical takeaways and advice you've given us. So again, I can't thank you enough for joining us today here at Lead Full Circle.
I appreciate you, Graham. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you all for listening. Love to hear from you. If you want to connect, you can hit me up on social media at Lauren Sisler. And just thank you so much for the opportunity. And thank you for all that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you again. And we'll see you next time on Lead Full Circle.